This is The Final Word Book Club. It's been a while since we've had a book club. Geoff Lennon with you, and I'm welcoming as a guest to the show today, Adam Collins.
Thank you, Geoff.
And also Glenn Maxwell, to talk about the book The Showman, which is going to be released. I suppose this podcast might come out just before the book comes out. I don't know when it will come out. Time is immaterial at this point. But a book has been done. You two have worked on it. And welcome back to the show, first of all, Glenn.
Lovely to be back. Jesus, it's probably about my 15th appearance, I think, on this show. I feel like you made the T-shirts, you made the caps. So I've got to make up for it in appearances, I suppose.
We had one in the World Cup in 19. We had a live stage show in Melbourne a year ago.
And we did about 5 IPL shows when you were, was it the year you were living in the hotel maybe, or maybe the year before that? Yeah.
2021.
I feel like we spoke more about footy than cricket on those pods as well. So Kilda was doing well at the start of the season.
Let's do on the regular show.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the 2019 one was a good one. That was about 45 minutes, maybe even longer, where we just chatted openly and honestly for ages. I think that was probably the height of like where I was. That was actually probably the downfall around that time was, it's probably a good, I suppose, memory point of like, probably would have been a good idea to probably search for some help around that time. I think going back and like thinking about that interview, it was like there was a lot of like warning signs that we just sort of ignored.
That things were difficult.
Yeah, things were difficult, and like I was extremely open and honest, I suppose, in our chat that we had then. But yeah, there was a lot of red flags there that I now know, obviously, that led me down that path, and thankfully I'm a lot better position, I suppose, these days.
I remember you were quite emotional, and you are. That's your disposition, I suppose. But so we probably didn't notice it because of that.
Right.
Geoff at the time, but
we didn't have anything to compare it to because we hadn't really had a
interview with you,
long conversation.
Yeah,
track one.
I suppose that was probably the start of our relationship. I think back then, it was,
to an extent,
yeah, that was probably the beginning of where we became a bit closer. It's probably more off the back of that chat. We were pretty intense, and there's a long chat, and went from there.
It's interesting that that is the basis of how you came to do this project. You'd both been talking about doing a book at some point, and you'd sort of thought, well, if you were going to do it, you'd probably collaborate on it at some time. But it was always a vague in the future thing that then became, the moment became clear after that 2023 World Cup and a year beforehand when you broke in your leg so badly. And that's the backbone of the story of the book. But maybe tell us about how that moment crystallized where this was what had to happen.
Yeah, at one point we were quite keen to do it as a documentary. Remember I sent you through
2022, I reckon.
Yeah, I think even before that, I got a recollection of sending you a clip of remember Shane Crawford made a doco in about 2003 of his life.
Yeah.
And he carried around a handy cam, and my vision was that you would bring you would take us around the world with you for 12 months, and the culmination point would be whether it was I don't know if it was a series or a World Cup, something was going to be.
It was building up to that Sri Lanka test tour where you were.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
you were bullish that maybe Glenn would play in Sri Lanka, and he was well, if he gets back into the test side, imagine that as a culmination of one of his tours.
Yes, and it may have played out that way, but yeah, once it became apparent that was going to be too difficult, then you got hurt, and it was clearly a serious injury. So that this all went on the back burner until, of course, and we had I don't think there was nearly a book a couple of years ago, but that fell through, and then. After what happened in 2023 with you in India, it just felt right to use a structure that we actually used in our live show last year and trying to catalogue coming back from the injury, profound success, but at the same time knowing that doing a sort of normal tour diary for you, I don't know, it would have felt like we were leaving stuff on the table.
Yeah, I still think we needed to... There were so many things we wanted to reference, I think, about the early days, which were really important, I suppose, in that 12 months from... Well, I suppose probably the most difficult 12 months of my life and my career, and the steps that were involved in that obviously had a lot of reflection points that we reference in the book. And I think the timing in 2022 and 2023, they were all great ideas when we had thoughts of doing a year in the life of, and when we thought it might be the most important year of my career, where it could mean a return to Test cricket. My white ball cricket was going really well. Felt like I was at the peak of my powers, and there was almost the thought about getting closer to the end as well, whether it was retirement on the cards maybe after the World Cup, and I suppose the the constant behind the scenes chatter about that, I thought could have been really interesting, but I think logistically it would have been pretty difficult, especially what was going on in personal life with Vinny as well. I think that would have been really hard, I think, to do, and we still reference a lot of that stuff in the book, but I suppose with a less confrontational sort of way, being able to talk to it instead of sort of show you.
But that point, I remember when we got the news that you had this, and it wasn't just a broken leg, it was a really horrifically broken leg. And I remember Adam and I talking about it with time, thinking, well, is like that could be it. That could be the end of you being able to play cricket, being able to, given that so much of it is about foot movement, it's about quick positioning, the things that have been the keys to your game. Any sort of project was kind of, it looked like it might never happen at that point, because that could have been the end of your career.
Yeah, and I was incredibly naive through that period, and I talk about it, that all I could remember was like footy broken legs, and sort of try to reference their rehab and how quickly they got back to play. But I suppose those players never been the same after it, and I didn't really have an idea of the magnitude of what I'd really done to my leg. They said a bunch of medical mumbo jumbo that I sort of went over my head, and I thought, oh yeah, it's all going to be fine after rehab, and like once I get back running, everything will be sweet and everything will be fine. But to be honest, it just still isn't. It's still a work in progress. It's still every day. It's a battle, and I think that's why it makes the whole journey so remarkable, I think, to sort of get back to where I was.
Yeah, I mean, there's the fact that you're able to do remarkable things when your leg was still at some level rehabilitating in 2023, and the book documents setbacks and how close you came to losing the World Cup dream a couple of times subsequent to the initial break. I think, like, from our perspective, again, our conversations at the time, Geoff, it was almost like pre-grieving that you might be done. So we spent that time together in the T20 World Cup in Australia, and you were in such good nick. You were so excited about the summer ahead. There was the test dream. The pins were being set up for you to potentially play in India. There was a model where you were going to play for Australia, am I right in saying, or something like that, in a 4-day game against South Africa. There was Shield cricket in the offing. It was finally, right, this is a thing that's going to be in place. Ronnie, the coach, George Bailey, the chief selector, Pat Cummins, the captain. You've got the perfect people who support you behind the scenes. Then for it to be ripped away in an innocuous incident, but a bloody serious injury. And then when you told me later that there was even chat about that maybe you need to amputate your foot, I mean, this is intense stuff. This was not a normal broken leg.
No, it wasn't. And I think broken leg would have been fine if it was just that. But I think the damage I did to the... Whenever you hear the word ruptured, it's never good.
No.
And when they
good rupture.
when they told me they'd ruptured all the ligaments in the syndesmosis part of the foot, and like obviously the bones separate, and I didn't quite realise how important all that is, and how long it takes to regenerate those little ligaments and the work that goes into your foot and actually get them to move. And that was probably the hardest part. I think the broken leg that heals with the pins and the plate that's in there, and but the getting the movement back into the foot was probably the hardest thing. And I'm so glad they didn't tell me about the foot thing. I told Vinny obviously a couple of days later, and but yeah, I was pretty glad not to get that news.
So you've got that framing. I guess it's a bit like it has been with Rishabh Pant, where the level of the injury is so severe that you think, obviously the most important thing is that the person survives and is able to live a reasonable and healthy and happy life, right? That cricket is secondary, but then as people who follow the sport, what you mostly wonder is whether they'll be able to get back to the level of being as dynamic and as impactful as they had been before that. And then you jump to the other end of that year, almost 12 months down the line, Adam, and there's that World Cup that we were paying such close attention to, of course, and a couple of extraordinary performances, the record 100 against the Dutch off 40 balls, and then a couple of games later, the Afghanistan game, which is just such an extraordinary achievement, even looking at it now. And I think at that point, I suppose, as a storyteller, you could naturally go, well, here is the story. Here is the story that that will be the easiest to tell and that people will want to know about is how do you go from this point to this?
That's right, but I was quite insistent in those early meetings that we were taking that it couldn't just be that. Like that was almost the soft option. Like we just tell the 360-day story from ruptured, destroyed leg to Afghanistan 201 not out. And of course, that's the meta frame, but I've described that as the x-axis.
I woke up, my leg was a bit sore.
That's right. And there are chapters... Well, there are chapters that do, a day in the life of, for example, the 201 not out, World Cup finals, another example of this. But yeah, we just knew that it had to be a y-axis as well, which had everything else that led towards that 1 year. So there are instances of chapters, for example, the one that goes into your depressive illness, where I think we only spend like 300 or 400 words talking about our timeline, if you like. There's 7,000 words on what happened to you in 2019, which again is a story that's not that well known and one that you now feel comfortable talking about, whereas even though you were pretty open about your mental health challenges at the time, there's a degree of detail here that people won't appreciate, as in they wouldn't have known at the time just how close you were to giving the game up, and indeed the fact that that wasn't the first time that you thought that actually I don't want to do this with my life, that happened when you were still a teenager.
Yeah, so 2008 was probably the first time it sort of reared its ugly head, and also at the time not knowing what was going on in my head and why I was feeling this way, and to sort of get through the other side of that back in those days, but not really put any safeguards in place to make sure I don't go down that route again. It's just, I suppose, a sign of the times. I didn't really know what was going on, and then obviously to know 11 years later after that what was actually going on in my head, and there was a little bit of an imbalance upstairs, and that just my mood wasn't completely, I suppose, directed towards cricket and results and all that sort of stuff. That there was something obviously going wrong, and to reflect on those periods of time, I suppose, is quite difficult and quite confronting at times. But it's a story that I hope people can relate to it at some point, and if they are feeling anything like that, hopefully they can, I suppose, put those safeguards in place so they don't end up, I suppose, in the same position where it can go down a pretty deep and dark hole.
It's interesting, like making the decision to go into that. So, to some degree, to a small limited degree, this was public. You'd taken mental health breaks before where that had been cited. That had been stated as the reason. People knew that there was something to do with that, but there wasn't much detail about it. Then taking the decision, when you decide, okay, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to collaborate with someone, I'm going to tell this story. You have to go into detail. You have to do the full thing. It's not just a media statement that says Glenn's taking a break. This is going to be your story in much more detail on the table. What was that process like? Like standing at the edge of that before you'd started, did you have moments of thinking, actually, I don't want to do this? Like the point where you have to jump into the pool and start swimming?
To be honest, once I was in, I was pretty much 100% in, and I wanted to make sure I could remember everything as clearly as possible. And I suppose it's a great thing with working with a mate who knows almost your cues for memory, little jogs here and there. You might mention a game of cricket that was on at the same time that will sort of get me going, and I'm able to, I suppose, put myself straight back into that position of, oh yeah, that's right, that's what happened. But I think going along the storyline of times when I was struggling, it's quite easy to remember those times just because of how difficult it was, and it sort of sticks in your head, and the steps that you put in place to, I suppose, not go down that way. And from the time of me, a different psychologist, and sort of going through all that, all those meetings and the chats that we were putting in place, different measures, the return to cricket, doing it in steps and finding a way to get the joy back. Strapping the pads on for the first time when I was down Geelong, and I sort of almost snuck down the highway to sort of escape Melbourne and make sure there was, I suppose, no one watching. So just
do fake moustache.
The sunnies and the fake nose.
My name is Max Plenwer.
Manuel came out.
we did get into your alter ego.
Yeah,
well, it's been revealed.
So that was I suppose to talk about that in more detail. it's a story I'm not scared of, like, because I've been able to live it, and I'm at that stage of my life and my career where I'm quite open and honest, and I want people to be able to share in this amazing journey, which it's closer to the end than it is the start, and hopefully people get something out of it.
I think a couple of things out of that. First of all, you've got an extraordinary power of recall, as do I. I know that's one of my gifts in life that Geoff and I...
If it's about which day of the week it was, Adam will always know. And whatever. It could be 24 years ago. What day was it? It was a Sunday.
But you've got a version of that as well, which is great. It makes it so much easier for me that, I mean, sometimes when we work on commentary, Geoff, you'll be working with a summariser or a former Test cricketer, and I won't even really remember their own career cues necessarily, let alone stuff that happened 20 or 30 years ago, which might be germane to the passage of play you're watching. You, on the other hand, I mean, you rattled off a series of scores for me from club cricket in 2008, and they were pretty much bang on. This was like the 5th division of the East Anglia comp, and you still got that level of recall. So that's part of the reason I knew we could do this. But also, like, how you were able to give me so much information about when things weren't good. I've not seen you like that. You've not, thankfully, never had a depressive episode in my presence, although in saying that, maybe there was one going on in 2019 without us recognising it from our perspective.
One of the things you become best at as a person with depression is shielding it.
Mask
it. You do what you think other people want, and you try to put on the kind of persona you think.
And that's what you learned through the process, right? Well, maybe to talk to that, like the idea that you realised that you'd been masking for like all of your adult life.
Yeah. So what I realised in 2019, I talked about this a fair bit, that during that time, I felt like I was the cardboard cutout for Maxwell, like the Australian cricketer with the playing kit on, that's smiling, that's having fun on the field.
The one saying bum pats.
Yeah, bum pats, like in the old Optus ad. Who was it? Peter Neville and Verinda Sandor. Yeah, I remember it. But yeah, I felt like that was what I was every day. That didn't change from hotel to breakfast, games, outside of the games. That's just who I felt like I was for such. It felt like a long period of time. Might have only been a couple of months, but I sort of forgot who I was as a person, and I sort of lost a bit of my identity during that time. And it just got to a point where I just got pushed over the edge, where I was just like, I genuinely can't do it. And I was so grateful at the time having Vinny with me in Adelaide and sort of breaking down to her, and Michael Lloyd, the Australian psychologist, who, thank God, I got such a great relationship from the academy days, and sort of had that long standing understanding with him that we're so open and honest to get together. I used to joke that every time I walk past her at breakfast, I'm like, "Oh, you got half a day spare for me?" And I'd basically filter all my shit on him, and he'd be able to, I suppose, talk me through those sorts of things, the things that were going through my mind, and so that door has got a lot of people.
We're in if you're listening to the audio version of this, we're in a literal hall of mirrors, which is apt for a reflective conversation.
With a mock World Cup or a Super Bowl or whatever it is set in the middle of the table.
It's a Salvador Dali work. A lamp.
Ah, right. Extra lighting. There you go. Resourceful.
So yeah, forgot where I was. I remember everything. Figure what I was talking about.
Lloyd.
So yeah, he was able to, I suppose, put the steps in place, and once we had the discussions with the staff and moved towards getting that time away from the game, I just remember the first few weeks just being pretty horrible. But after a couple of days, being able to find that, find those people that knew you when you were Aussie playing for South Belgrade Cricket Club and running around, and in your St Kilda footy jump at the local ground, they knew me as that kid coming through, and sort of surrounding myself with people who knew me, Glenn Maxwell the person, not the cricketer, and
people who didn't need the persona.
Yeah.
Because that's a really tough thing for not just you, but for a lot of cricketers, I think, and athletes and people in the public eyes, that the public, there's a perception of who you are, which can be very difficult to grapple with. And I get that. You know, I feel the same way about people, I don't know, podcasts I listen to or hosts on television. You know, you feel like there's an intimacy there when really, in many respects, I think anyway with you, there's a view about who you are in the core because you play reverse sweeps and reverse ramps and that kind of thing, and it misses a whole slab of who you are as a human being, which hopefully the book starts to correct a wee bit. But like very early on is what I guess I'm saying, in your 20s, people formed conclusions about you which were quite a fair way from the mark, and that's frustrating surely for a lot of athletes who are pushing against that.
Yeah, I suppose having that nickname, that moniker early days didn't really help at all. The fact that I was, I suppose, a different type of cricketer that hadn't really been a part of the Australian setup for such a long time, and I was probably the same growing up. I watched the traditional players play for so long. We watched Australia dominate, but it was sort of the same type of player all the way through. It was like, you're good at out hundreds, you bowl fast, take wickets, or you Shane Ward. It's like, that was sort of what it was. Gilchrist was probably the first person to sort of come in slightly outside the norm, where everything else was quite pretty stock standard up until then. And I think when I sort of came along, because I played different shots, I moved around the crease a lot, I was a bit more inventive. It just sort of gave the public, I suppose, a sense that was my personality, what I was doing out in the field, and it couldn't have been further from it.
He's wacky, he's zany, he eats his breakfast.
Yeah.
But in a way, though, don't you feel like you felt like you needed to meet those expectations, right? Like when you're on camera doing a bit, when you're doing a commercial, when you're doing an interview, that, oh, right, this is the mask I put on when I'm Glenn Maxwell TV, Glenn Maxwell kind of thing. And thus it adds to the broader problem about you not, for a major part of your life, being able to be open about who you are.
Well, it's even, I suppose, a lot of the filming stuff that we do, and the sponsors get you to do the crazy stuff because that's what they think.
Yeah.
You're like,
there's this new line in the bun.
All right, everyone else is going to be sitting here reading a book, and you're going to be doing backflips over there, and
was there, Adam, like as someone, like, you're trying to help put the story into words. Like, did you feel a weight of responsibility that you've got to, like, this is a difficult, complicated story, and you've got to tell it right? You've got to help Glenn tell the story in the right way. It communicates the story.
Honestly, it was the easiest chapter in the book to write. I wrote it the day I turned 40. I wrote I remember the day and how it played out. Of course I do. How it all sequenced. I knew I had to
Wednesday
meet. Yeah, Thursday anyway. But I knew what needed to happen in order to meet that deadline. Or, you know, some of these deadlines are artificial, some of them are real, and feeling like the words just came because you had been so lucid in the conversation. You had been so open that wasn't challenging. Other chapters, they were all easy, by the way. I didn't ever feel taxed by writing, and my normal, you know, any self-doubt that I had about this project, which is natural and I think probably healthy. If you think you've got all the answers to all the questions, you've probably got something wrong in your head to begin with. So there's that natural layer of apprehension. But when it came to the actual process of putting words next to each other coming out of your mouth, I'm probably lucky that I had experience doing it in politics and writing for other people as well, but still.
Yeah, so you're having long conversations and then...
Massive conversations. Epic conversations. Yeah, you know, we didn't bother transcribing because it would have been, I mean, we would have had a million words, literally probably more than a million words because the interviews were so long.
We had a shocker one night where it went for about 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Where it was, oh no, it's going to be a quick chat. I remember we started, I reckon it was about maybe 8:30, not my time. I remember Vinny sort of looking at me, Christelle going, it's pretty late here. And she's like, I'll go to bed. And we're like, yeah, no worries. All right. We went to bed about 12:30.
It included halfway through the conversation you going into your den and pulling out all your cricket bats to show me as well, which was pretty fun.
That's right. That was good. Yeah.
No, this one does this. Yeah. This one was this one. It was, here's the World Cup bat. And that stuff's fun too. I don't want, you know, we're being quite heavy at the moment, but it's light and shade, the book. Like there are parts about this book which are extremely fun.
That's a very Greg Shipper, that light and shade.
Yeah. Like, you know, you talking about your bats is genuinely funny and brilliant and lovely and adds to the colour. You telling other stories about your youth, about stuff you did at the cricket academy, about sitting on the balcony with James Faulkner drinking beers, talking shit. That stuff's fun. So, you know, we don't want to make it sound like you're this morose character. That there is more than one string to your bow.
Yeah. I don't want to... I'm certainly not a straight down the line, button up, straightforward character. I know I've got some rough around the edges where I hope that comes out. As we said, I think we wanted to want it to feel like this story's been sort of told at I'm sitting across from you at the pub, and I think it comes across that way. And I suppose a lot of the stories are certainly stories that they do get told, I suppose, when we are sitting around a table. And
filtering matters so much, and there are so many dull sort of, in inverted commas, autobiographies of athletes where someone else has done the writing. It's all as factual or straightforward as they come. Naturally, I was delighted to be selected for the third one-day international, in which I made a score of 43 loves with the soccer team to a competitive total. And clearly it's just based on scorecards. Really, there's no personality. It doesn't come through. So that would be, I've ghosted plenty of columns, but I've never ghosted a long-term project. But doing that, it's more a collaboration than a ghostwriting exercise. Totally. Was that the most sort of challenging bit to go? I've got to make sure that the genuine voice comes.
Yeah, and super satisfying as well. I felt like I wrote the first swing I took at writing anything on the book was on a flight where I had no distraction. I had 2 hours in the air, and I was able just to write. And I was really happy that reading it back, I'm like, that actually sounds like you. I was able to get into that mode pretty quickly. And obviously, Geoff, we should note that you edited the book, so you've had a big hand in helping massage things and shave things when edited, shaving, and making sure that when there was too much extravagance, perhaps in the language that I was using, because maybe too much of the way I would write came through and needed to be carved off, and that's just part of the creative process when ghosting, I suppose.
That was the most interesting bit I found, because basically the deadlines were so hard that you were having to crank out chapters quickly. Yeah, I was having to come in and sort of try to put things together. And there were bits where I was like, "That's Adam,
got to go.
I'm going to take that word out.
Absolutely,
make that a Glenn word.
Yeah,
because the Reg told me." Stum.
Yeah, but I was like, nah, that looks like, because I highlighted it, I said, well, it looks like an error, and then you can try. Don't
worry.
I was like, that's probably harder.
Yeah, and right, like you're always drilling down on pitches, stuff like, whereas because I've done so much podcasting with you, I know your vocab,
of course.
So it was kind of interesting to do that in a triangulated format where it was like pass the parcel from Glenn to Adam from me back to Glenn. To like, how do you think that sounds? And then you would then give that another read over. And
probably not enough F-bombs, if anything.
We do swear in the book, but not like excessively, because I felt at times that if we didn't swear, it wouldn't be, because there is an argument for not swearing in these things. I understand that. I respect the perspective that you should try and use proper language, but that's right. We all swear to each other too much, because that's just the culture in which we've been brought up in.
Yeah.
There was the chapter that started with "fuck me dad," it was recommended that we soften that a little bit.
Yeah. The first 3 words of chapter 2 are "fuck me dad," I think from memory, which was reflective of how you and I framed that chat on the phone when discussing your sort of your rehab and going home from hospital too early and all these other bits and pieces. The other thing about detail, to go back to your original question there, Geoff, we were quite careful not to turn it into Badger Central, like this game happened and let me tell you every single thing Glenn remembers about this chapter, and then I'll tell you everything I remember about it. Then we do 2 games. 201 Not Out, which is a day in the life of you waking up and before you do the most extraordinary thing in your professional life, and World Cup final day, which deserves, and the Badgers are gonna, I hope, love it, because people want to know like how you were thinking about Pat doing all these extraordinary things on the field. People want to know about the conversations you were having with him when you were batting. They probably don't give a fuck about what was going on in that much detail when you were fielding in, say, I don't know, the Sri Lanka game or the Holland game. These things aren't worthy of a chapter; they're worthy of a line.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed reading it back, and look, probably the greatest feel I got, I think, during our chats was the look on your face sometimes and then you'd sort of finish with, I didn't know that. Like the fact that I could like give you some sort of, I suppose, more insight to sort of things that were, I suppose, going on behind the scenes or in my life, that you could see your eyes light up at a few of the things that I was able to sort of give you, I suppose, from my point of view.
And I've got a screenshot of you which I kept and sent to Ben, I think your manager, who was instrumental in this project, by the way, Ben Tippett. We can't gloss over him. If not for him, this wouldn't have happened. Where there's this face you get when you know you remember something. You're like, I got a screenshot of you clicking at me going, oh, I remembered something from nowhere, deep recesses of the brain.
The recall is extraordinary during the correction process. Things like, so-and-so got me wrong, and I clipped it over mid-wicket, and you'll be like, it was a leg break and it was over mid-on.
Yeah.
And you're always right. Like, I went back and checked the ball by ball. All of this, every time you flag something, I was like, well, I get, this is my job. I've got to check all this.
Yeah.
And how's everyone's name spelt? Are the scores correct? To do the kind of, in the detail stuff, you're always right. Like, every time. I don't know how you're like, fourth ball of the 37th over, yep, that was the one that I could open. You don't know how that watches.
I've got a weird memory for a lot of that stuff, and it's not just my innings as well. I think in the games I've played, I think, especially when you're watching the sidelines, and I talk about it in the way I prepare for T20 games and one-day games. Before you go out to bat, you're so focused on what's going on out the ground. You try and take as much information as possible, and that's like almost me getting my eye in. Like, instead of wasting time out there taking 5 to 10 balls, I'm hoping that gives me a few, I suppose, balls in the bank or a little bit of information that they can, which is probably why I can remember so many things about specific games. And then once I get out, I'm so invested in the game where I've probably stuffed it up or I've left it for someone else to do. So I'm sort of willing the other guys to do the job, and I can remember every good shot they hit, every mistake that's made. So yeah, it's a draining process, and it makes going to bed at night bloody hard. and it means, like, even if you're not going out for a beer post game, I'm still awake for like 3 or 4 hours like afterwards, and still running through the game in my brain.
But if you weren't doing that, you'd just be going under the boardwalk. Like, your brain will find something.
Yeah. So the Homer Simpson.
Hey! For old Grimes's funeral.
Frank Grimes. Doesn't get mentioned enough.
Right. So you were comfortable telling your story, doing the personal, the interior stuff. You're comfortable doing all the cricket things. Was it the most difficult part? I would guess. I haven't set this answer up beforehand, but I would guess would be talking about difficulties with other people. Like, you talk through complications with, say, your relationship with Steve Smith or Matthew Wade, who are good friends of yours, and there were things that didn't go smoothly at different times. You talk about a difficult relationship with Virender Sehwag in the IPL, who's probably less a friend of yours. You talk about the relationship with Justin Langer and the challenges that led up to his tenure as coach finishing up and those kinds of things. I would guess there's a lot more anxiety about how it's going to be received when you talk about someone else, as opposed to being frank about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most difficult thing I found was discussing other players and coaches. My teammates, I didn't feel like it was a problem because there's so much love there, and a lot of it's positive. From my point of view, I think when you're talking about setbacks or talking about selection or things that are, I suppose, always up in the air, then that can be the difficult thing, how it's taken. But in the same way, if I respect those people, I think it comes across that way, that I respect those guys, and I acknowledge that I made mistakes with a lot of them. And the Steve one, we're great mates now. So the fact that we've sort of had those times where we sort of went full circle, and there was times where I was out of the one-day side. There was times where there was some doubts around my space in the squad, and to sort of come full circle and be a pretty, I suppose, integral part of each other's lives, and where we've played our cricket overseas with Washington Freedom in World Cups together. It's been really enjoyable to share company with him. You need to tell those stories, though. You need to explain exactly what was going on. And as we said, we didn't want to half-heart this and not discuss, I suppose, things that were big issues or big moments in my career, and shaped certain parts that were either setbacks or things that led me on a different path. But yeah, that was probably the hard thing, is mentioning players that you're either still playing with or coaches that you still might play under. I think that was probably the difficult part.
You put it well there about that being difficult for you, and about you always wanting to provide context, which I think was really helpful. So Langer's a good example of this. You and Langer had an up and down volatile relationship when he was the national coach, but you really wanted to make it clear to the reader that you and he aren't like an estranged pair. Like, you have a relationship with JL, that you had a relationship with him that extended to when he was your batting coach in the national team in 2013 when you first joined the Test squad, for instance, in India, that you understood and appreciated and respected a lot of the things he did as coach. But that doesn't mean you're not able to truthfully tell your story of working under him. And to half-heart that kind of thing would be, I think, doing a disservice to the reader. You felt like it was important that you gave your perspective on how things worked. Doesn't mean that you don't respect the guy. It just means that it's all out there and you feel like you've done your bit. And I think that's perfectly commendable. And most athletes do that at some stage. The small distinction here being that you've elected to do it when you're still playing. But look, if you weren't saying it now, you'd be saying it in 10 years' time, right? That's part of everyone's life when they finish up as an athlete.
Yeah, I think we shaped the JL time really well, and we talked about that when he came into the job. It was the worst time in Australian cricket possible.
Yeah,
and everyone hated us, and he was the person that basically got us back on side with the public. And I think we put that across really nicely in the book. And we did have an up and down relationship. There was times it was great, like playing under him, and I really enjoyed it. And I loved being, I suppose, pushed harder to try and be better, and I really enjoyed that. And there was other times where I didn't need that. There was other times I just wanted to be myself and go out there and do my thing. And sometimes those things the timers just didn't quite match up. And but yeah, I certainly respected the hell out of him. And same thing, he was one of the guys I used to watch growing up. And I've got memories of watching his 250 at the MCG. I still remember where I was sitting.
Me too.
I reckon I was third tier over long off in the Showman stand.
M15, back row, just in front of where the standing room is.
Nice.
You know, you're over these things.
That's good.
But the other thing about Langer, I just wanted to add here to prompt you to, a lot of the Langer stuff comes up in the chapter about depression and anxiety, but you wanted to make it really clear, and we say this explicitly, Justin Langer and how he treated you in the 2019 World Cup is not why you had a breakdown. Yeah. You were going to have a breakdown anyway. Yeah. It just happened to coincide with a time when you weren't being coached, in your opinion, particularly well.
Yeah, and I made some really bad personal choices, and I talked about post the World Cup semi playing a game for Lancashire 2 days later.
Yeah.
Instead of taking a well-deserved break away from the game after a really tough World Cup. And in my brain, I justified it as I just need to, if I play, that'll push aside the stuff that has just gone on over the last 6 weeks. And it just never had a chance to just like come out. And I never had a chance to relax. And I ended up getting home from England post that season, and I was absolutely broken. I just hadn't had a break. I hadn't allowed myself the chance to refresh mentally and physically, and it all came to a head pretty quickly once we got into that T20 series against Sri Lanka.
And I mean, so much of this, I think, it just underlies the difference between book culture and headline culture, right? Like there'll be, I'm sure various outlets will pull some headlines out of this and be like, Maxwell slams whoever, or that kind of thing. But there's not an understanding that criticism of something that somebody did doesn't mean that you think that person's a bad person, or you think that an entire body of work is invalid. You know, everything they did in their career is wrong. There's an inability to actually understand criticism, to the point that even the word criticism is viewed as negative. Criticized. You know, to be criticized means to be assessed, to be given feedback, to be like, criticism should be a good thing. It should be a welcome thing for anybody who wants to improve. So it feels like my read on it is the balance that you guys found in trying to talk about some of the difficult things while also acknowledging the positives of the people involved in different contexts. That seemed like an important part of the balance.
Yeah, and you don't want it to come across as this, you just poor me. Yeah, poor me, like I had all these bad breaks as a cricketer. That's absolute bullshit. Like I've had an amazing career. I've been extremely lucky. I was ridiculously fortunate even to make my debut for Australia, which we talk about in the book, where I was playing second 11 and club and pub cricket for in South Wilts in Hampshire, and got plucked to play a tour in Dubai against Pakistan. And I understand that's extremely fortunate. I'd played, maybe a dozen games total for Victoria at that stage, which is ridiculous. That's not enough. That's not a body of work to be selected on, but
it's a silhouette more than a book.
Yeah, and I was extremely lucky at certain stages, and potentially extremely unlucky in some other circumstances. And we discussed both sides of it to sort of, I suppose, give you a bit more of a broad feeling as a ringer.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are some hilarious stories about misfortune for you. One of the most obvious that I never knew about was when you nearly made your test debut without anyone even realising it in 2012. I won't tell the story here. People can read it for themselves. But little things that come up where you're like, bloody hell, that is a... But you're also very quick to acknowledge on multiple occasions that you've led a blessed, charmed life as an Australian international cricketer, and that, yes, you are not completely satisfied. To be completely satisfied probably requires you to get another run of the test team. That's fine, that you're mature enough to acknowledge that, whilst at the same time not allowing it to define your whole existence, not turning playing 7 test matches into something that is the only thing you're fixated on.
Yeah, and it'd be easy to say, like, I'm devastated that I haven't played a game for Australia. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that it didn't work out that way. Doesn't mean my career's a failure, and I'm quite understanding of that. Yeah. And there's been times...
You while to come to that?
Yeah, it did. I think before the Sri Lanka tour in 2022, I'd sort of come to that like, you accept it. You just once you get past that stage, it's like, you know what, my time's sort of gone. It's okay. But getting that like little bit of a taste, and that's probably one of my favourite chapters. Like talking through that moment with Ronnie and with Finchie, it's so special. And I didn't think I felt that way still about Test cricket. I was sort of one of those guys in the change rooms, maybe taking the piss out of red ball a little bit, rightly or wrongly. But I suppose once you get that feeling of, shit, the dream could still be alive here, it just changed all over again, and I feel like I've been in that same cycle since 2022.
That's definitely a defence mechanism on your part. You can just, it doesn't matter, like, because it obviously matters so deeply to you because these details are so fresh in your mind.
Yeah, that I can remember the exact moment and the exact position I was standing. I remember the look on Ronnie's face and just the feeling. It was so cool and then so heartbreaking.
That morning on the second test of Gore when you're in the nets and you come over and said, I'm not playing, you're like, wow, collectively we're all heartbroken.
The look on your face, that almost broke me.
Yeah. Well, you were pretty cooked as it was, I think, from as I recall that morning. But, you know, because you're in the nets, I mean, we go into a bit of detail here, like you thought you were going to play. Pat pretty much told us you were, unless something changed, going to probably play.
Yeah.
And just on that, by the way, Pat refers to your debut in 2012. I love that you have this memory of this lovely story about watching some tape of some analysts and then reverse sweeping Sajid Bale first ball, who was the hardest player to play at the time. And Pat's got an equally striking memory of it, which he immediately tells in the forward. I didn't prompt him, by the way. That was him going, I'll tell you a story about when I first met Maxi. I'm like, that's nice. Yeah. No, so Pat,
you would not believe what I've got for you.
And similarly with Virat, when doing the forward with him, he was terrific to work with as well because he has such affection for you, and it really came through in our conversation at the time and the subsequent back and forth about getting the words right for him. But he, has this really striking memory of when you interviewed him for the Cricket Australia website in 2016, and he remembers every... Yeah, Cricket Australia website, mate. But all of the bits that were involved in that day, and him having this weird relationship with you that had low points, to the point where he blocked you on social media, which is hilarious. But then it comes full circle where, like, you guys will be mates for life. Yeah. And he was overjoyed at being able to contribute to this book because he feels such a closeness to you. Like, that's a story about, like, that's a story about male friendship. That's a story about growth. It's not a story about cricket.
No, it is. It's in my mind. I'm obviously smiling, but I'm just thinking, all blokes sometimes just need a cuddle, and those two guys, I'd just love to give them a hug right now. As some of the words that they were able to put to paper, I felt so loved after reading them, and it was so heartwarming to hear those words. And Virat's been an unbelievable close friend over the last 4 and a bit years since, I suppose, making the move to RCB, but more so the stuff off the field, I think I've enjoyed so much. I think we all know what a great cricketer he is. We all know his training work ethic, but the time that I've spent off the cricket field with him has been priceless. Like, the time watching us both grow as dads has been probably my most rewarding part, and seeing him change from day one at RCB to where he's now has been so much fun. His relationship, firstly with ABD, his relationship with Faf, seeing obviously Faf rip to shreds in the gym and almost going, I've got some work to do.
A bit of a link with all of you, I guess, with Pat, with Vera, with you, and the two of you as well. You know, you've all got young children. You're all in that stage of your lives. So, you know, it felt like there was an emotional simpatico on that basis, that you understood. You know, a fair bit of the story is about Logan coming into your life and the challenges along the way to that, and your relationship with Vinny, and the ups and downs, and then coming to this point where you've got this little family, this little trio. It felt like there was a nice emotional sync between, I guess, Adam and Glenn, two young fathers.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right, because it's immediately something that we'll talk in reference or adjacent to the parenting work that we're doing. And it's interesting that, both Virat and Pat were very quick to want to talk about you as a dad, right?
Yeah.
And that surely comes from them experiencing that themselves, and in my case too, that there's this whole other thing that you get to do, and very privileged to do, and very blessed to do, and not everyone gets to do. And you talk about that as well, that for a time there you didn't think you were going to get a chance to be a dad, and that was going to be a difficult thing for you because you had really wanted to be a dad. So hang on a sec, Geoff, how do you want to do this?
I'm with you.
I don't have another SIM card, I think, but we can use that. Yeah, we can do the thingamabobby, the post fact. Yeah, that's all right. We'll keep talking into this as well. We've got the backup on here.
Oh, true. Yeah,
so we'll kick it up. Yeah, that's fine. And you talk about that as well. There was a time when you didn't know that you'd be able to be a dad, in as far as you and Vinny had gone through difficulties. There'd been a miscarriage. Found that interesting that you wanted to tell that story. It's a very personal story, having a miscarriage. But at our live show last year, probably the most striking memory of that bombastic, hilarious conversation where you were 11 out of 10 Maxi that night. It was so good for our audience at the Corner Hotel. But you wanted to tell the serious bit, and you wanted to bring awareness to the fact that you'd been through something like that. So that's also, I think, an important part of the book.
Yeah, I think once we got over the initial shock of what had happened, we wanted to be pretty open and honest with people, and I suppose share our story. We didn't want to sort of dance around it and sort of have that awkward, you guys, after you got married, you guys are going to be trying for kids soon, and sort of be able to, well, actually, this is what happened. We're going through this. And then the more we opened up and sort of were really honest about our situation, the more we got other stories from other people that had gone through the same thing, or had family members who had gone through the same thing. And I think sharing those stories and sort of almost having more people to rest on and not feel as alone, because ultimately that's exactly what you feel. As soon as you have something like that happens, you think, it's only us that this has happened to in the world. Why are we so unlucky? It's the same thing as like the selection clause. Why am I one missing out? Why am I so unlucky? But being able to, I suppose, talk about those sorts of things made us just, I suppose, feel a bit more of a part of a community of people that had gone through, I suppose, a heartache and had found their way at the other side, or are still struggling with certain things. I know I've got really close friends who are going through like a lot worse stuff that we went through. We went through one, but there's some heartbreaking stories I've got close to me at the moment who are doing it really tough, and all I can do as a friend is, I suppose, be there for him as much as I possibly can.
Sorry, I was just distracted. That's okay. So I think we're okay because we've got two backup audios. These will be terrific. I mean, I only unblocked that a couple of weeks ago, so I don't know what's happened. Maybe I've left it on for 24 hours at one point accidentally. It's most likely what's happened here. So,
all right.
So pick it up. Yeah. Maybe pick it up with that a snifter closer to you, because we've got these audio files.
So tell me about Vinny's involvement in this as well, because if you're, when you decide to write a tell-all book about your life and you're married to somebody you have a kid with, well, it's going to affect them. There will be a knock-on. From our perspective on it, she was really supportive and was involved and helpful and was contributing what she could and helping make sure that information was right, that we had details of things we weren't sure of and that kind of thing. That I guess was there a long conversation first about, am I going to do this? How did that part of it pan out from your side?
She was actually really supportive from day dot, and even some of the phone calls we'd had, I'm sure Adam would hear her in the background yelling out like corrections to some of the things that I was saying. Actually, no, it was this date, or actually, no, this is what happened. This is the date of our marriage. Like, can't believe you've forgotten already.
I thought you remembered everything.
Yeah, cricket games.
Yeah, the cricket recall was better than some of the other recalls.
Yeah. So she was really good. She was really helpful through other stuff as well. So even when we weren't together all the time, so maybe the MLC, when we were still having those chats, I suppose some of the correspondence stuff that she'd sent through, she would have read it a couple of times as well, and she probably did more editing than I did.
Well, you're both great on that front. Again, it's Vinny, like, she was the first one in before you were. Like, she gave these things proper attention and care, and it certainly helped the fact that she's got a pharmacy background when it came to, and thus a medical background when it came to describing exactly what was going on with your foot, because she had a better handle on it than you did.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on. I knew I broke my leg. That was about it. Some ligaments were sort of out of place, but she had a really good idea of what was going on. And
you were attached to a bag of ketamine.
That was one of the most anxious. That was one of the most anxious parts I had. I think with the whole book was that,
to make sure.
I mean, I think I said to you and you, we have to make sure that it was ketamine, because we can't just throw out there that you were on a trip on a horse track if you weren't. You were like, no, it's cool. And I googled the hell out of it to prove yes, that would have been the case.
I know a bit about ketamine, but not so much medically. I would say plausible. It does have a hospital use. So, right. So she's happy for this story to go out.
Yeah, she was more than happy. I think she was. She knew that I think something was going to happen over the last few years, or at some stage in my career like this, and she's always been really supportive, I suppose, of any venture I sort of go into, and as with the editing, she wanted me to go 100% in. She wanted me to be honest, and she was happy for certain bits to be in. Wasn't happy with it, I suppose, a few of the other things. But
some of your detail and knowledge of stuff about her, which she read it, she goes, not in a million years are you allowed to. I didn't think any of it was particularly bad, but I also appreciate that it's her prerogative to be embarrassed about what she's embarrassed about. That's fine.
I think if her family is reading it, I think I can understand.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't faze me. I think it's endearing. I think it's a great story, Yvonne. And the fact that we sort of come out with a beautiful baby boy, it's even better.
Yeah, it's a big part of that story that year, that all of the negatives and then this amazing positive that happens at the same time, and you're having to learn everything on the run. There's so much going on in that 12 months. It really was the ideal year, if you like, to try to document.
Yeah, I think the chaotic part of the World Cup, which intertwined beautifully when Logan and Vinny arrived, I think was quite a nice. It's almost like two halves, like before Logan, after Logan.
Yeah,
it's pretty conventional up until then.
Yeah, it's like Maxi played a shit shot, but caught a bit off, like first ball, and then after Logan, it's like smacking everything out of the middle, not sleeping. Perfect.
Well, I love that.
Gold carts.
That's it. Like the 40 ball 100 comes the day after they arrive. Again, this is a bit of detail from the book. You can read the chapter in depth to get the full nuts and bolts of this. But you hadn't slept a wink because obviously Logan had baby jet lag, and thus you get to the ground and you're completely exhausted. You're so grateful that you're batting first, so you get a bit of rest, and then you go out and do that. And of course, as you mentioned before, that is the game. That's the time you bat. You bat one more time, and then you fall off the back of the golf cart, which made national headlines. I can't believe we've not even mentioned this yet. But
this is what I was going to come to next.
Yeah,
because it's that roller coaster thing of 40 ball 100, golden duck, golf cart, concussion, miss the England game, come back for Afghanistan. It is absurd. The whole thing's absurd. But a lot of what's interesting in this book is that it's getting a sense of who you actually are, and people have this. There's the view of you that like you're loose, you're reckless because of the way you bat, right? So he's obviously like that all the time for the field. And then the golf cart story is assumed to be that. They're like, well, obviously he's pissed as a fart and fell out of a thing, like Freddie Flintoff in the Pello. But it's actually the most innocuous story in a way in the book. There's nothing going on. Nothing really happens. You just don't know that Mitch Marsh is about to turn a corner suddenly, and you can't even remember what happened to that.
it's quite funny because I actually had Mitch Marsh and Alex Carey with me at the pub last night, just having a chat, and I actually asked them, I was like, all right, I actually haven't asked you, either of you guys, what actually happened? Because we go in depth about my memory loss during that time, and both of them couldn't get their story straight. So Carey goes, oh, we turned right, and Mitch goes, no, I turned left. And so they couldn't even get their story straight.
At least we describe it as a U-turn in the book rather than...
We didn't give the direction.
Give it the direction. It's kind of good in a way. I don't want to be... But just on that, though, like I think it's worth you just padding out the answer to describe the fact that it's an endearing story, in my view, about Mitch and Stoinis. That is to say, the two of them in the front, and you're having such a lovely time listening, singing, having a sing-along. I would love to know what the song was. Having a sing, and they
probably don't stop believing.
And the reason they do the U-turn is so they can keep. Again, it's details in the book. They wanted to sing the rest of the song, right? Like that is a very relatable. You know, we were in an Uber singing together last night, right? So, yeah, brilliant as it was. But you know, sometimes you don't want the car to stop. You do want to keep singing in the back of the car. So it applies for these two guys. There's nothing in this. It's so innocuous.
Multiple laps around a roundabout so that Shares Believe could finish because we're only halfway through. I'm like, going to keep going around the roundabout until we're done.
I sat in an Uber for an extra minute and a half just to finish a song, and the driver was absolutely following me. He's like, he was singing with me, so it happens, and I think it's just it's so Australian, but it just ended up I was that person that was on the wrong side of it, and it feels like
if you landed on the grass, you would have been fine.
Absolutely fine. I landed on the middle of the road, and it's just, and then the return, I suppose, and talking about like picking up my scalp off the ground. There's so many nice sort of full circle moments, and I suppose Mitch and Alex feature, and Stoin to a point feature quite heavily in the book. And, I really enjoy telling stories about them because they just are amazing people and guys I've had great relationships with.
Even the fact that we come full circle on golf, and Geoff and I, from time to time, more Geoff than me, take the piss out of the golf thing with modern cricket and what a big part of your lives is. But you actually explain why. I think that's worthwhile early in the book, the reason why you guys are so fixated on golf. I think it's a perfectly reasonable answer. And then we even come full circle on that, because what do you do the day before the World Cup final? You don't train. You go and play golf and you have a hell of a round, and that's when you know, okay, I'm good for the final. It's not about hitting 100 cricket balls and middling 70 of them. For you, it's, you know, what you do on the 14th when you make eagle on the 14th. Like, I'm good for tomorrow. Like, it reflects that we are all different. There is no cookie cutter to underpin all high performance. We all do things different ways.
Yeah. Driver, 4-iron, or 5-iron, and then rolled in a 12-footer. Perfect. Pretty simple, isn't it?
It's my favourite start to a chapter. I hate golf, but I really liked the way that the start of the chapter was written. It hit it very nice.
Yeah, it was chapter 14 and the 14th hole, and I knew those two things would tie together well. It happens to be the World Cup final chapter, which goes into, as I say, extraordinary detail on the gameplay and your affection for Pat, because he gives a lot of love to you at the start, of course, in the forward. Yeah. And you get a chance to almost pay that back in the way you describe him as a leader and as a tactician.
Yeah, we obviously talk about pretty extensively the evolution from, I suppose, the practice games early days, which was almost like a practice rehearsal run for Pat, who hadn't done a lot of captaincy or one-day cricket before that, and to sort of, I suppose, get used to this group. And after we lost the 2 games, it can be afforded that generally panic can set in, but the fact that he was the guy against Sri Lanka to sort of turn it all around for us individually, not just as captain, but individually, with his performance to lead by example as well, not just, I suppose, make decisions. And that can be, I suppose, a big thing for anyone who's captaining, to put so much focus onto your captaincy to almost leave out personal stuff or forget the importance of your own individual performance. He was able to keep both. We referenced the New Zealand game with his runs at the back end, which got us to a score which was they're able to defend, and then the World Cup final was almost like his final masterpiece. And Pat could easily write a book about the World Cup final, just his experiences and how he saw the game. I would read that every day of the week, because I think it would just be so fascinating. the conversations he had with Andrew McDonald and Dan Vittori about the bowling changes that we'll potentially implement, and the fact that we had about 35 bowling changes throughout the game it was bloody incredible, and just makes me smile just thinking about those final couple of chapters. They're a great ride. They're such a fun ride, and it's the cricket nothing in me, and also like just the re-jogging of your memory, reading through your experiences, and it just makes you happy.
And coincidentally, Pat's got a book coming out the same day as yours on the 30th of October, which is a nice little...
Not about cricket.
Not about cricket at all, which is good, I think, that he's doing a thing that's unrelated entirely. I look forward to reading that too.
Yeah, it's unrelated to cricket, which is why I didn't get me to...
Got Julia Gillard instead.
Yeah, but you've got Pat in your book, so if you want both of them,
read our one.
If you're only getting one. The conclusion, I don't want to give anything away about it, but it's after you come home. That's the most significant part of the book. It feels, I don't know, it was the thing that I was most affected reading that conclusion. So I'd encourage people to go and find it and read the book so that you can get to that point. But
don't just flick to the last page. You've got to go on the journey. You've got to, I suppose, go through the emotional highs and lows, and that's what I'm really proud about the book. It does sort of take you on a bit of a journey where, as I said, it can be confronting at times. It talks about real world problems, not just cricket problems, and not just like personal own issues. That I suppose things that can affect people in a wider variety of things as well. So I'm so proud of it. Adam's done an amazing job, and I'm glad we were able to make it work after a couple of years' time.
Yeah, and I'm just want to say that I'm extremely proud of you to go ahead with something this ambitious. The structure of the book, it does like bounce around a lot. I think I put in my note at the front that it's like your life in a way. You got to kind of hold on and just go with it. Just kind of got to go with it and understand that it's not a normal narrative structure. We do go back in time a lot. We do go on wild diversions, and then we have weird segues and all the rest of it. But that's okay. Like as you described before, it's akin to sitting with you in the pub for an afternoon or an evening. And if that's how people feel when they get to the end of it, then I think we've done the job well. And yeah, I'm proud of what we've put to print.
It's been sent off, I say yesterday, but last night, but the early hours of this morning, so actually still...
His first book interview, by the way, Geoff, because we're the only people that have read it so far. So you're going to do many, many of these interviews, Glenn.
Yes.
We haven't read it just once, I reckon.
Yeah. But it is done. It is complete. It's a lovely feeling from my side that it's gone. Last thoughts from you about now it's done. Is it nervous at this point because you don't know, you're wondering how it's going to be received, or is it just the blissful piece of at least being finished?
Both. Yeah, you want it to be well received. You want people to read it and have the same experience reading it for the first time that we've had reading it for the 10th. Proud again of Glenn and doing this and coming full circle. And I think we say towards the end it's about acceptance of who Maxi is as opposed to who the big show was interpreted as being and all that kind of thing. And you couldn't have done it more comprehensively than the way you've done it. Proud of the fact that it's been a team effort with the three of us, but also Ben Tippett, who I want to mention again, who looks after you as your manager, and he's just an extremely sound human being, a tremendous sounding board, huge source of support to all of us. Vinny, your wife, we mentioned before how integral she was to the project, and to our other family members as well. I mean, if these things were at a sacrifice, and I know that Rach is pretty glad that I'm finished, for example, and I'll be able to focus on some other things, and the fact that it, to some extent, was a final word project as well, because Geoff's been key to making sure the final product was as good as it could be.
Yeah, it was an amazing ride. I'm grateful that it's done. I'm certainly going to miss the recounting of certain events. I really enjoyed, I suppose, going back in time a little bit and sort of talking through those key moments in my life, and you reeling off different teams and that I might have played against from back in 2008 was great to sort of, I suppose, rejig the memory, and playing against Munford at Sam Tony and out in Norwich, Norfolk, outside of Norwich, and they were great times and great fun. And yeah, I think I'm relieved a little bit because it is stressful. I think also putting yourself out there on a space where people can, I suppose, it's sort of the final masterpiece, sort of. Maybe not the final masterpiece, but pretty close. And yeah, I feel like just putting yourself out there is obviously difficult, but I think I'm at a stage in life where I can sort of handle it a bit better, where probably a couple of years ago I probably couldn't have. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how everyone enjoys the story.
The Showman is out October 30th. We'll try to do some tie-ins with Final Word events across the summer. There'll be other events as well. So if you want to get a copy and have Glenn scroll in the front and have a chat to you, there's probably a good opportunity you can do that somewhere in Australia too. There'll be an Indian release. There'll be a UK release. All of the above. Stay tuned. Date, I believe. I think the India release is November 7th, which is the date of the Afghanistan game. Nice. So nice little touch there. So it will all be happening. Keep an eye on the internet. This has been the Final Word Book Club. Glenn Maxwell, Adam Collins, thanks for joining the show.
A pleasure, Geoff.